I'm gonna open this up. Hello, everyone. I'm Anthony Ferris, an MFA Prince student here at Edinburgh University. As a graduate assistant in the Bruce Gallery, I'm here to welcome all of you to our first Wednesday night webinar. Due to COVID, the university's Bruce Gallery will be dark most of this semester. So we at the Bruce Gallery are organizing a series of events every Wednesday night at 5:15. The Wednesday webinars may be as short as 20 minutes or as long as 2 hours. Tonight, I'm pleased to introduce our first Wednesday webinar speaker, artist Tommy Coleman. A native of Florida, Tommy Coleman was talented enough to get a free ride to art school at Cooper Union in New York City. He did his graduate work at Yale. Now living in Brooklyn, Coleman makes his living as an artist and educator. His visit with us at Edinburgh is due to his appointment as the ERIE Arts and Culture January 2021 Artist in Residence. You may have noticed it is February 3rd, not January. Last week, when this talk was originally scheduled, a few students tuned in because it was the first week of the semester, so Coleman kindly agreed to deliver his talk tonight. Thank you, Tommy. I'm looking forward to your two back-to-back talks. The first will be explaining why you don't have a website, and the second will focus on the use of language in your work. Bit of housekeeping, we'll be using the same link every week for the Wednesday webinars. So everyone attending these talks should know that they are being recorded. We'll post the links at our website, brucegallery.info. Follow us on Instagram at brucegallery.eu. Everyone is encouraged to participate by commenting or asking questions in the chat or Q&A during Tommy's presentations. Please mute your microphone. And now, Tommy Coleman.
Thank you so much, Anthony. So I'm very grateful to be here, and I wanted to start off by talking about when Lisa initially asked me to do this discussion. It was really funny and still remains to be really funny to me because it feels like I'm a bad influence. And by that, I mean to say that I'm not saying that students, artists, educators, anybody who is creative or otherwise should not have a website. I'm here to talk about websites and like why an artistic website has never worked for me and why I feel like it doesn't, or at least I haven't yet found that format, and why I kind of operate in this like weird realm as an artist where for me the website isn't important. So let me just start off by saying that I do have a website. It's just really hard to find, and I make it that way because for me in my artistic practice, a website has become really just a kind of a check mark on whether or not I am engaging in a professional manner. So these days, when you apply for a lot of teaching positions or other jobs, they kind of want to see that you have a website. For me, my website sort of sits there almost like a tombstone. It becomes a signifier of who I am and where I'm at, but it doesn't really give you much more other than images and some basic words and materials about my practice. So I kind of devised this discussion to talk about my lack of a real internet presence as far as like having a fully developed artist website, as well as how I view and how I observe websites and like how they have a relationship to artists that kind of extends their practice. So also, let me just say that this conversation is kind of piggybacked after my artist lecture that I gave in January. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to screen share a series of things that I've got to show you. Okay, so this is my Google Chrome browser. For me, the start off of this discussion comes down to what happens when you Google my name. I know that we've all done it, so we can all admit that we've had to Google our own name at one point in time, and it becomes kind of a funny situation, especially if you ever find childhood photos of yourself. In this case, Tommy Coleman is a young surfer who also has an Instagram presence under the name of Tommy Boo Boo One. He and I are definitely not the same person. Just to give everyone a heads up. This is him. I am not this. Okay, so right there's a state of confusion. The other thing that does come up third is my Instagram. So that's usually how people would ever get in touch with me. If I ever look up photos of Coleman, usually you will see photos of the same person or other individuals by the name of Tommy Coleman who have various different lives, and sometimes you'll find me. Apparently, Tommy Coleman is also district attorneys, as well as a very legendary young Black boxer who existed in the early 1910s. I looked at this guy once. He is an actor, seems really cool. I'm sure I'd like to be friends with him. Other than these things, you'll also sometimes find my art. But the real trick with any artist is always what happens when you type in their name and art. In this case, you'll find a bunch of things that come up that are associated with my practice or actually photos of me, and they have different connections to things in the world, whether they are residencies that I've participated in, galleries that I've shown in, or other museums that I've had my work displayed in. In this case, Tommy Coleman art will also eventually lead you to this website that I have that is secretive and really only gets flagged or found now because of the Museum of Art and Design, where I participated in the Art and Design Biennial in 2015. I'm not going to go to the website for the sake of why I have it or what I'm talking about today. Right now, you'll find mostly things that connect me to either Yale or Long Road Projects, which is the nonprofit by which I was invited to ERIE Arts and Culture. So that everyone should check out and look into. So for me, a lot of my practice or how I related my practice to the internet started off not just by how I connect to the internet. To give everyone a heads up, I'm a millennial, and I was probably privileged or fortunate enough to be raised in a household where I didn't actually have the internet until I was about 17 or 18, and I didn't have a smartphone until I was 20. So I really just couldn't afford it. And growing up, it kind of limited my access to things unless I was using the internet at other people's houses. Eventually, my artistic practice found its way to something called Tumblr. Tumblr is a blog-based photo website that anyone can have. Something that came after like LiveJournal or MySpace, and gave people the ability to host their own sets of images. For me, a lot of my artistic practice comes down to this idea that my work is accessible to people, and while it sometimes includes conversations that can be difficult to have or are just hard to explain, they are the kind of things that are purely democratic and people should be able to participate in them. So for me, having a blog always made sense. Unfortunately, I have lost touch with my blog since 2018, and that's more of a matter of I wanted to have slight amount more of agency. And by that, I really am trying to say that I really wanted to be able to have conversations with people about things that they're seeing in the world, the way that they might be responding to my work, or have it be something more accessible. For those who know Tumblr, yes, you can have ways of communicating with people, but it wasn't as user-friendly. So on this blog of mine, Hard Work, you'll find my reactions to things, my connections to my practice, materials, and other ways in which I view work in the world. And, while sometimes it's not always my work, it is something that has influenced my work. And as I was doing this, I began to realize that, oh, I'm creating like a lexicon or a language of like the things that I'm interested in and why I'm interested in them. And it helps connect me to other people to also explain my work. As a young artist, I think that happens to everyone. I mean, young, old, doesn't matter. Uh, Sometimes it's hard to discuss what our work is, like where it begins and where it ends. However, pointing to something in the world is easy to do because you can say like, oh yeah, that thing, I'm totally into this. This relates to me. Um, uh, for instance, this is a Josephine Halverson painting that I saw at a gallery and really just connected with me and my practice. And I was like, yes, this I totally understand. This is one of her observational paintings of a posted sign on a tree. Um, so yeah, that's how I started my relationship to the internet. This photo of my dog is probably a cute one to end on. In my observation, the use of an artist's website is usually just a quick way to explain, this is my work, this is what it looks like, this is how big it is, this is the materials it's made out of. Sometimes it also gives you a little bit of an insight to the work of the artists themselves or how they live, which I think is really valuable. It just so happens that that's not always the case. There are artists out there who I greatly respect and love, such as Felipe Baeza, who's been a friend of mine since undergrad. And his work is really influential. And while it doesn't necessarily speak to my identity as a person, it speaks to the things that I care about in this world. And while I think it is very political work in this case, it's funny that it's not on his website because the image gets to be what it is first. And then we talk about the politics of the work afterwards. And to me, that's kind of what a basic artist's website can look like. So, you know, other artists whose work I think just do this really quickly is a dear friend of mine and painter who I very much love their work, Sarah Esme Harrison. It's very quick to the point. You get to see the work and then you get to kind of acknowledge a conversation about it later. Zoe Walsh, they create a body of work and how it gets displayed is great because I get to just mediate it through the screen and see it and observe what I'm looking at, which is already kind of funny because this is really a body of painting pieces or pieces that have been painted that are based off of mediated images that you see in the world, usually photography or like film. The thing about Zoe's practice that I really appreciate is that it does a great job of explaining them and their relationship to their work. In their about statement, they give a really great insight for the ways in which they view their work and what it's like to not identify personally within the binary or to be a trans individual or a non-binary individual who is in the state of flux similar to their images. So already that's like just a great basis for like how you see the artist through their website. In other cases, there's like very high profile artists like Tom Sachs, who, you know, is represented by a blue chip gallery and you would expect that their website would be like top notch. However, in this case, it's pretty straight and to the point. It's just got collections of the web exhibitions that they've been in and how they work. And this is a really valuable aspect for, you know, how to talk about Tom Sachs's practice. But also, I want to say that it comes down to Tom Sachs having a store and how his work is commodified. That to me is something I never wanted to be associated with my work in a way where it needs to just kind of not be something that I'm thinking about making a multiple of to sell, but it is a way in which, speaking for me, my practice is more about the pedestrian nature of it, being able to see it on the street, finding the work and not realizing like, oh, this is Tommy Coleman's art. And sometimes it just operates outside of the sphere of the gallery. The thing going back to having a Tumblr that I really appreciated, even though it seems a little counterintuitive, is that sometimes the work, because it would be reblogged so many times and get picked up by other people, I wouldn't have a connection to the image as much. It would almost be like I gave the image to the world and it got taken away from me. While this might bother some people, I found it to be really valuable because it gave my work the opportunity to be more connected to individuals. The use of other websites that I just wanted to talk about is like, you know, it's funny because this is a functional website devoted to the L train in New York, and it just tells you whether or not the L train is running, and it updates like, you know, every minute or something like that. This has a function, but to me, it also seems like its attitude and the way it exists in the world almost seems like an art piece. Similar to that is endless.horse. So this is a drawing of a horse that is endless, and it continues again and again and again. So in some ways, while this is just a website, to me, I think of it as kind of like an artistic endeavor. It's an artistic website because it's using this to make a sculpture or an object. It just happens to be a website. Other interfaces that I really appreciate would be something like, you know, Radio Garden. Radio Garden is this really amazing functional website that pinpoints locations of where you are, where you were, or locations that you put in, and can give you all of the local radio stations in relationship to that location. To me, I always think of this as like a really great insight to the things that you see out in the world that you may not have connections to. So let me also just say that my idea of a website exists in a lot of different formats. For instance, having a website or having a blog was an opportunity for me to kind of disassociate myself from myself. And by that, I mean, it's like, okay, well, if I can make a website devoted to something that I'm interested in as a character and make it a part of my practice, it gives me an opportunity to think about my practice as something that is something, yes, I'm responsible for and I make, but exists outside of myself. So for a number of years, I had a side practice as an artist as this this entity called the Body Library. And a lot of what the Body Library was responsible for was talking about this one project that I did and the extent of how it affected my artistic practice. But then it became an entity devoted to the idea of how to make books more accessible that people felt that they were passionate about and needed to be out in the world and be accessibly free. So what I had done is I started scanning complete books and requesting friends who had books that they really liked to scan a complete book and then send me a PDF of that book. And I would start kind of like a book library of stolen books. To me, that was just more of a way of having things be accessible, and it became this kind of an exchange. So for instance, like I would create a list of all the books that I had and sometimes books that I was looking for. And if you had a book that you were looking for and I had it, you could give me a scan of one of yours or just something you enjoy, and I'll give you this book. I think that that's like the most functional I have ever been within like having a website or how I maintain a practice that uses the internet. And to quickly kind of delve deeper into other artists whose work I appreciate, but also whose like web presence I really care about. Good friend Andrew Ross, who I've known since childhood. His work is really incredible on its own, but I just really enjoy the simple idea of how he maintains his practice and like what is the professionalism behind it. For instance, it's really just about him, and like you don't get to see much. You have a way of contacting him. You get to see isolated portions of his CV, and then if you want to see his work, he's actually gone out of his way to connect you to the websites where the galleries had shown his work, putting the focus of the viewer not just on what his work is, but its presentation through the gallery that has shown his work. I love that idea because it kind of puts this idea of cooperation or collaboration with a gallery at the forefront while talking about the artist's work. So for instance, like Signal, a now defunct gallery that existed in Bushwick, Brooklyn, showed 2 shows of his work, and how the work was displayed was really important. The Signal website was always very simple like this, and it gave you a connection to how his work was featured in magazines and how his exhibition looked with install photos that gave you a good idea of sense of scale and space. Someone like Catalina Ouyang, whose work takes up a lot of space, whose sculptural work takes up a lot of space, but also is really reliant on the idea of installation. Her work does a really good job of displaying itself while also having a sense of humor about, well, I don't want to say humor, maybe a sense of perspective with who she is and her character. The little icon, as you can see here, is a bloody knife right out of a horror movie. And she has other links in her website, such as providing her money, which I think is like a very funny and straightforward way of connecting with an artist. And then you have work from artists like Joseph Buckley. I love Joseph Buckley's work, but I also really love going to Joseph's website over time, like as if it is a blog. And that's because as soon as you land on his website, you have an idea of who he is. One, he is originally from London, and he is based in Brooklyn. So deciding to connect himself very conceptually back to where he's from, it has to be a .uk website. He has a very mysterious clock that counts up on his website, and it is the introduction to his practice. This is actually the exact date and time. This is a count up from the exact date and time he decided that he was an artist. And it also correlates to the death of a very close friend of his. To enter his website, you go through that link, and then you become connected to his work. And the thing that I enjoy a lot about Joseph's website and his work is that everything that he makes becomes a PDF. So it has to be linked to how he connects to a person. So if you would like to see his work, you actually have to accept it into your computer as if you're downloading it like a book. So this project, Aristocrat and the Earth, immediately comes up as a PDF and becomes this sequential connection of images that sort of tell a story about his sculpture. My love for this is interesting because it's kind of like, this is a format in which I could show my work in order to explain or display a sense of logic. In this case, he's showing you a sequential connection to images and storytelling while also giving you a display of what his work is. His work isn't just this sculpture. It is the act of having this narrative where it very filmically, from this high up perspective, gets buried into the ground and becomes a statement about the project and whatever the narrative is behind the project. And a lot of his work functions in this way. And to me, it's just such a great, beautiful way in which an artistic practice can function. Yeah. So if you ever have the opportunity, please look up Joseph's work. He's an amazing artist. Other ways in which I think having a website is important, but doesn't really pertain to me, is if you are not a part of a collective, or if you are a part of a collective, excuse me. For instance, Future Farmers. Future Farmers is a collaborative artistic group that was initially started by an artist by the name of Amy Franceschini, who you could look up. Her work usually deals with nature and the interfaces of education, and usually connect things back to the earth. A lot of her projects require a very in-depth website in order to explain what they are, what the work is, not just trying to say like, oh, look, this is a sculpture I made. Instead, it has to be this valuable narrative that gives you the story, but then also gives you the construction, and sometimes tells you the collaborators in which they've worked with and what the work's function is. It becomes kind of a tool or a device, and usually they're associated with a book or some sort of illustration in order to explain the connection from the viewer to the scenario to whatever the tool is used for. Those are the kind of ways in which that I think having a practice that gets translated online is really valuable. Also, for my practice, I will say that these days, since having the Tumblr, my connection to having some sort of internet presence always comes down to Instagram. For me, Instagram becomes this really valuable connecting tool to think about how your work is viewed through a screen. We all continuously are connected to our screens, whether I am on Zoom with you right now, or I'm looking at my phone and seeing what's popping up at this exact moment. In the case of having an internet presence, for me, having an Instagram became something that I was really connected to, because it displayed my work, yes, but also allowed for very up-to-the-minute connections from viewers and their connections to my work, or how they'll feel, and then helping kind of grow a relationship to what my practice is. It gives me an ability to put something that is as pedestrian as very quick drawings or the daily drawings that I make on yellow notebook paper into a public sphere where people can see it. But it also gives me the opportunity of taking on other projects. For instance, starting another Instagram account as the name Tommy Coleman, where I hosted a talk show while I was in my pool at my family's house, having a Instagram live conversation with another artist or friend or practitioner. It helps kind of connect like, what is the value of the internet and community to this body of work. While these things are things that I make, it's not all that I make. However, it gives me a very quick connection to community. And it also exercises my connection to drawing and the things that help fuel other parts of my practice, whether it's sculptural or performative or community and social based. These are just ways in which I get to exist as an artist and a person at the same time, because my practice is inextricably linked to who I am and how I go through the world. And you know, there's a lot of other artists that are like that. This is work from Abe Lampert, who is a painter and started off as a comic book maker, I should say, or an illustrator. And as the comic book side or illustration side has kind of left his practice, a lot of his practice is boiled down to working through Instagram to make or show these images, and how he edits the image by looking at it on a screen and then going through and changing the way in which he wants to make the image. knowing that, we all look at screens all the time. So if this doesn't look right on a screen, then I need to make sure that it looks like it can exist in the real world while also being seen online. These paintings are really incredible. They're gouache on paper, and you can have really great connections to them while having no information to what they are, but still get into this kind of a story aspect that happens with all of his work. Whereas he does have a website, and its limited nature doesn't do much more than what his Instagram does. And I think while this is all great work, seeing it mediated through something like Instagram gives you a really good connection to how fast he goes, how much work he's constantly able to produce, how he works through process, and the connection to his sense of humor or who he is as an artist. So, this is all work that I find to be very valuable. Also, the ways in which we see work these days is greatly different since the pandemic, but also, over the last 10, 15 years of our existence. This is Big Window. Big Window is a gallery-based platform that was, not platform, let me say that. It is a gallery that doesn't exist in the real world. It just exists as a space through Instagram, which becomes a website, and the gallerists who run it work with artists to produce a body of work that usually gets displayed through some sort of mediated screen, namely a website. In this case, this is the project that they currently have. So introduce a big window, and each project is associated with an essay, and this is the art. So you see the art on the main page, and then you'll see the correlation to writing. And I find this to be like a really valuable way of how to see artwork, because it gives you a moment to like just go to a website and like fall into something. This is upcoming things. So other formats for viewing things through Instagram are like, anytime you see a gallery that you're not sure what it is, or if its chaotic nature brings you into a different perspective of seeing art, how artwork is seen. The Collaborative Center for Storm, Space, and Seismic Research has this very outlandish name with years of themes that are associated with all of the work. But if you wanted to go to the website is more of a connection to, the artists who they've shown with and how they create some sort of created object that exemplifies what they're doing in that year. So like producing a series of shirts that are essentially art objects, but are also t-shirts. And then talking about how this is currently actually under construction, but how the gallery functions as not always a physical space, but a virtual space. Yeah. For me, I'm most comfortable with not having an active website because it gives people the opportunity to reach out in a way that feels more pedestrian without having to send an email that puts them in touch with me and kind of creates a one-to-one visual relationship while also being something that we can constantly be in contact with one another. So, as I'm constantly updating my Instagram account, it gives me the chance to think about, oh, do you, as an artist, get with my feelings as an artist? And, it provides a lot of great opportunities. So I hope that through all of this, I have kind of answered Lisa's initial question of why I don't have a website, while also unpacking like what is the value of a website. But I would just say that young people as artists or creative thinkers have a connection to the internet that like sometimes people who aren't quite at a millennial's age or whatever, not to sound ageist, don't understand the veracity in which people consume images. So, you know, a young artist's connection to what they think their art is only enhanced by what they're looking at. And if I can continue to scroll through Instagram and see 100 things at once, or 1,000 things at once, it just gives me a deeper connection to how I'm going to verbalize my artistic practice to what I'm seeing in the world. Thank you.
I'm just jumping in here. I'm sure other people have questions. This is Lisa just chiming in from the dark here. But you mentioned the veracity of consumption of images on, I guess, you know, on the web, Instagram and social media, almost as a generational kind of break. And I totally am starting to understand that a little bit, because you kind of referred to it in one of our meetings with students the other day, where I was sort of surprised that they knew about, it was the artist who, the cut piece, Yoko Ono's cut piece. I was kind of shocked, you know, that because they're a first year student and they actually knew about it. And you were mentioning then about the sort of images. So when you said veracity, what word was that? I'm trying to, did you mean fierce or the quickness or?
Yes, I would mean like the fierce, or like the sheer amount, yes, the fierceness for which we consume images.
Tommy, this is Forrest. So are you just a way of like profiling yourself as an artist, but it's also just because of how abundant it is to everyone, it's more available?
You cut out for half of the question that you asked.
Let me just type it in the chat.
Does anyone have a website? Does anyone have an Instagram page?
I have a website, but it's awful.
Go ahead. Go ahead and unmute yourselves, everybody. We only have a few minutes left. It'd be great to just chime in.
I had to do it for funny story about my website, actually. When I was in my undergrad, I had to do a computer science course. It was just part of it, whatever. And for the final was a website. So me being the person I am, first time around, I was like, oh, if I go 100% on all the other projects, I could probably just get away without doing a website. So I actually just didn't do it. And I paid the price. I failed the class and I had to do it again. I feel you. I mean, I have a very, I don't know, I was very anti-website for a while because I was just like, I don't want people to see my work online. I want people to see it in person or something, all that good stuff. But after some conversations with some teachers and stuff, I realized that was a bit childish. But I like the approach that you gave for, you know, a website being important, but it not being, it doesn't have to be so formal. You know, there are other ways, and I haven't really thought of it like that.
Yeah, So like, you know, the informal nature of it is like really important to me in my artistic practice. Like, and that's just how I operate in the world. But like, I can't see myself making a website that's devoted to like this drawing I drew, or this like sculpture that I made that exists, that is supposed to exist outside for a limited amount of time. If I wanted to make something that was devoted to that, I would probably first make a book about that project. And then maybe if I wanted it to have a more outreaching connection, maybe I would make a website that is a version of how you view that physical book. But still, that's like the idea of how my work gets mediated through a screen. Like, I just can't do that for myself. And that might be like a hardline stance that I take. But I think it's a stance that like a lot of people take, and not to put words in anyone's mouth, but like, I'll show you this quickly. Like, Kevin Beasley is an associate of mine who is an amazing artist, is, you know, a world-renowned sculptor, also went to Yale, and is the nicest guy on the planet. If you ever go to his Instagram, you'll get to see like a really great connection to his constant studio practice, as well as really adorable photos of his cute baby, and like get to have a connection to his art and practice. However, if you Google his name, he doesn't have a website. You know, you can find a Wikipedia page on him. You can find the gallery that's represented him and show you some of his work, but like, he doesn't use a website. And yes, maybe he is past that point of professionalism where one may not need a website or something. However, it's like, I showed you work by artists like Tom Sachs, who has a very developed website that is minimal, but like gives you connections to buy things that come from his studio, to like shoes that he's designed that are connected to like a Nike website, or like his exhibitions in Venice or LA. You know, like there's different ways of how work can be mediated online. I just think that I choose to not participate by having a website that says what my practice is and what my practice isn't. Instead, I'm trying to say, this is the way that you can connect to me, and this is how my work is displayed in the world. That's it.
I feel
I
that.
hope I answered some questions.
Forrest just put one in the chat.
Oh, are you saying because Instagram is so abundant, it is only necessary for an artist to utilize that tool? Are our profiles exclusive? Is exclusivity dead? Okay, one, no, I don't think that Instagram, are you saying this? Oh, I'm not saying it is necessary for an artist to utilize Instagram at all. In fact, like, I can think of plenty of artists who have Instagram accounts who never show their artwork on it ever. And I can see that as like, you know, they don't want to put their entity or the thing that they make out into the world through that sort of medium. No, I don't think it's necessary. And I also don't think it's necessary to have an Instagram to see artwork. I'm just saying that I enjoy the format for how I view stuff. And then, no, I think, you know, unless you're making stuff in your basement, I'm pretty sure like all by yourself, exclusivity is dead. I don't think exclusivity exists anymore. As we've seen, especially since the beginning of 2021, like if you put something on the internet, you have to be held accountable for what it is. You know, like if you say something, you need to understand that it is being linked to your name. So like, I don't think exclusivity has anything to do with profiles. As to whether or not exclusivity is dead, the way I'm describing it, yes. However, if you are making something that you are choosing to not have be on the internet in any shape or form, like that's fine. Like it doesn't have to be connected to something. You just have to make sure you document it for your artistic practice to explain what it is. So that way, when you apply for something in the future, you have a way of explaining what the work is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. I was late. I was in class, and that's kind of my big question out of this. What I wanted to know.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. And like these questions associated with our artistic practices happen in lots of different ways. Another sculptor or artist that I highly recommend everyone get the chance to look at, if you can have, is I'm sorry. Let me show this. Is someone like Laurent Toison. Their sculptural practice is really awesome because they're an artist who makes objects and thinks about like the way that we observe objects in the world and our connections to them, but also has a history of saying like, the artwork exists in the gallery or it exists as a drawing. And while she has an artistic website that really does a good job of outlining what the project was, sometimes it's really missing a lot of things. Initially, this project that she did over a decade ago, I don't think was on any form of website. This is Insert Magazine that she made. It is a series of works all about like sex and intimacy. And the only way to get this magazine was to find it inserted into a book that would usually exist like in a public library or something. So like if you went to a library, you opened up this book and this happened to be in it, voila, you found the artwork in the world, but also you had the connection to like what the object is.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Would you say that since you don't have a website, but you have a type of social media instead, you feel more connected to anyone who sees your art?
One, I like that question because I think it's like a deeply personal connection. And so I will say, yeah, I do. I mean, there's images of my artwork out in the world that are, if you Google Tommy Coleman art, you'll find things that I've made that exist on like other people's blogs. And, unfortunately, sometimes there's like no semblance of a connection to my name or like me as the author of that image. And instead, my work just kind of exists out there as like a really emotive kind of meme, it's like shared. That's fine with me. I love that my work is to have a connection to a viewer outside of myself. I firmly believe that we are no longer able to control images. And that should be really exciting while also still being really terrifying, So does that question, Olivia?
Yeah. Would you also say that social media has more of a connection versus a website?
Yes, I'm going to say it does. I'm going to say it does because like you can, no matter what, the first step is that you choose to look up someone's name and go to their website, or potentially find their Instagram and go to their Instagram. And then as the author, you are choosing to make a website or you are choosing to have an Instagram. And I'm only using these two things as an example. There can be plenty of other ways in which you can see stuff, I'm not saying it's one or the other, excuse me. I just think that like the idea that like a viewer's connection to a mediated image doesn't need to be just connected to like what a website is. Essentially these days, a website is like a business card. And I don't know if there's many artists out there who have business cards unless they're really like doing something for a community or an individual, like if I only make portraits of dogs, then like maybe it's good to have a business card for my job where I make portraits of dogs, right? So, like having an Instagram account is kind of like, yes, I do all these things and this is how I live and these are the things I'm interested in. This is my community. You don't have to subscribe to my way of life, but it gives you a window in which we understand what Instagram is and what it can be used for. So that way people are like, yes, I get this. Yes, I'm going to choose to participate in this, you know. I think the websites that I showed you do very small things to shift the way in which we are connected to a website-based culture, I guess. Does that make sense?
I got a question. So
Mhm.
in terms of networking, like, you know, going to galleries, stuff, meeting people in the art world, whatnot, how do you feel having a website versus having an Instagram has, you know, affected you in terms of networking and showing people your artwork when you first meet them?
You know, it's funny because like networking is such a funny word to use these days, just because like one, you know, it's connected to the idea that maybe we are just like meeting people out in the world and having interactions with them, or we're meeting someone through Instagram or some sort of social media and having that sort of connection to them. Personally interacting with people out in the world, when they ask like, oh, what's your website or how can I see your work? You know, sometimes I'll show them my Instagram, and the fact that I'm being serious about it makes them understand that it is a serious part of my practice. It doesn't have to just be, oh, go to, you know, TommyColeman.com or something. You know, I don't have TommyColeman.com, but like, you know, it's just a way of being like, okay, you know, I think of my practice as something that's one-to-one. Yes, you can't go to you can't go to a link that says paintings and then suddenly see all of my paintings. Instead, you have to go through stuff in a sort of a sequential way. And I think a viewer gets to have like a connection to the artist's logic or how the artist lives their life. And professionally, quote unquote professionally, I think that's helped me. Like a lot of the things that I do and the opportunities that I've gotten as an artist have all come to me just by way of like people finding my Instagram or my blog. You know, when I gave my artist lecture last week, the first museum show I was ever asked to be a part in, at first I thought it was a spam email because someone emailed me out of the blue saying, hey, I really like your work. Can we put it in the Museum of Art and Design? And I was like, what? Okay, sure. And it really just became like someone was cruising through Tumblr and saw something that I made and liked the way that it was displayed on Instagram and like had a connection to the things that I was making, you know? The things that I try to tell my students is like, you're always capable of falling in love in like different, you know, whether it's through like, I love the way that this thing looks. I love the way that this person communicates. I enjoy that this space has a certain sort of glow and atmosphere to it. And these are all different techniques and attributes that make me feel a certain sort of way. But it doesn't mean that like you're any less connected to those things, you know, if that makes sense. Maybe that's really abstract.
I think I kind of get what you're saying. I was just thinking, I mean, like I'm all with you with you know, we consume a lot of imagery, and I think that has impacted how we consume art today.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, unloading a bunch on one, you know, website or an Instagram or anything can become, you know, overdone and kind of lose the point or lose some of what you're doing. But I was just thinking in terms of like, you know, if you're at a gallery or something and you're on that, you know, when you're possibly, you know, you're talking to the director and it's like, oh, well, do I pull out my Instagram? Do I say I have a website, or do you not even? I guess it's kind of, or in your opinion, how would you go about that?
Personally, I would just stick with showing them my Instagram account, and then the onus is on them, the gallery, to show the work that I make that exists in that gallery on whatever sort of social media or website that they want to show it. Like, I think it exists in their universe however they want it to, but for me it could, this is just a series of like Instagram posts, and I'll probably still be okay with that. Like, it doesn't have to be something that's deeply connected to my website, you know. For me, a website doesn't just say like, oh, I make these things, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just a way in which my work functions. And yes, it's tied to my practice, but it's also like who I am as an artist and as an educator, or even as a person, you know?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to just jump in and just point out the time. It's 6:15, and that first talk is over technically, and but there's probably a lot more to cover. Do you want to take a short break before you head into the second talk here at 6:15, or do you want to just plunge along?
Yeah. Do you guys mind giving me 5 minutes?
Nope.
Literally 5 minutes? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna get some water and I'll be right back.
All right. Welcome.
Olivia, Ferris, a couple people dropped out of the workshop, so if you guys just want to stay, I can send you an email full of instructions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine by me. Also, like, I've had to kind of change how the actual workshop functions, just because you know, initially I wanted people's connections to music and their artist statements. So now I've just kind of reformatted what I wanted to show just a little bit, while also talking about the same artistry elements that I was going to talk about before. So I'll be right back. Thanks, guys.
Are we doing it through something else, or is it just through Skype, right?
Right now,
Yeah.
there's a second talk following this one, and then after that, there's a workshop. So, but the workshop is closed to the people that are signed up for it. Forrest was handling that. So we have one more talk, and he's gonna right now he's gonna talk about language and his art, and so that's optional. If you know that's on right as soon as he gets back with his water.
Okay. Yeah, I could do that. I definitely won't be doing the workshop, but I'll say for the next talk.
So while we're waiting, is let's see. Anthony, I opened up, but did Forrest, Grace, Olivia, Riley, Violet, do you all know each other? Do you just want to say who you are? Because it's a small enough group here. Violet, you want to start?
Sure. I got here. Sorry. My roommate is sitting right next to me, and I guess it goes out of her computer and into mine, and then out of her computer and then into mine, however many times. That was kind of funny. But I'm Violet. I got here a little bit late because I was in class until 5:30. But I'm a sophomore computer animation major. And that's the main stuff I can think to say. And I'm Grace Music. So
Hi, Grace.
it just comes out echoing out of her computer. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, Grace is my roommate also, so I guess I can let her go next.
Okay, I'm Grace. I'm a freshman. I'm an illustration major. Yeah, that's basically it.
Thanks. How about you, Riley?
Hi, I'm Riley. I'm a sophomore sculpture major.
So you know what? I just realized two of you said you have a class till 5:30. We're going to be doing these every week. And I'm wondering, should we delay them till 5:30 then instead of, because I thought if they're 5:15, people can usually get out of class a little early, and then we could have them over before 6 if people had a 6 o'clock class, you know, because usually they're going to be like maybe 20, 30 minutes. But what do you guys think? Violet, Grace, Riley, Olivia, what's your opinion? Should I make it 5:30?
Do what? I was gone. I had to do something.
This is the first of a series of Wednesday webinars, and we're going to have students from other school talking. We're going to have visiting artists. We're going to do sometimes a conversation. Sometimes we're going to be visiting studios. So every Wednesday, because the gallery's closed, I'm just saying we got to do something. So we're going to have something every Wednesday. And but I was going to start it at 5:15 because I thought people can kind of log onto their phone at 5:15 at the end of class if they're still in class. But now I'm hearing a couple of you were late because you had class. So should I instead make it like 5:30 or 5:35 or something? Because some of these are going to be very short, like 20 minutes, but other ones can be up to 2 hours, depending, you know, an hour and a half. So I'd like to know, since you guys are the people that actually came to this thing, I want to know, what do you think in terms of time and scheduling?
Okay. While trying to avoid the echo problem, since I have class until 5:30, it's an in-person class, so I like being able to just have a couple minutes usually to finish up whatever I'm doing on the computer and get out of there. So like 5:40 would probably work best for me, but I don't know if there are many people here. I mean, probably not any of the people here right now have a 6 o'clock class on Wednesday since they're here right now.
Right, right. Would 5:40 be better for you, Olivia?
Yeah, I don't know what works best for other people.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter to you. Riley, how about you?
5:30 would be more convenient for me.
5:30, okay. And Grace, what do you think?
My last class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday ends at like 1, so I'm fine with whatever.
So Violet, back to you. Would you mind? I'm game for moving it to 5:30 because 5:15 is always kind of this crazy time. And then would you be comfortable, Violet, just showing up later to the class, to the event sometime?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's fine. I mean, I can just join late if 5:30 works best for most people. I also got out of class 10 minutes early.
Okay.
Today, so it could vary from week to week.
Yes. Well, I appreciate everything, your conversation, and I see that our guest of honor has returned, hopefully with some good water handy. And take it away, Tommy.
Hey, okay. Thanks everyone for being here. Okay, if you guys have handy some sort of piece of paper or series of papers that you can write on, as well as maybe some sort of marker and or something visually, responsible for making marks, that would be really helpful. Thank you. So I've had to kind of reshape how I wanted to initially do this workshop, and a part of giving me an extra week just kind of gave me more of the time to focus on some of the things I wanted to talk about.
Hold on for a second.
Relationship to,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this isn't actually the workshop. This is the talk about, so just want to make sure, because Forrest, you have people coming for the workshop at a different time, right?
This isn't back.
Anyway, did I misunderstand what you were just saying? Is this indeed, were you starting to introduce the actual workshop just now? That was my impression.
Yes, I'm kind of starting to introduce the workshop, but I'm also going to introduce like the idea of like language and artwork. yeah, if you would like, we could wait until 7:15, but I'm going to do a presentation about language first, and then connect it to what the workshop is.
Fantastic.
The workshop is brief also, so if you want to wait, we can wait until 7:15. It's up to you.
No, I didn't. I just thought there was some confusion in the sequence. I'm very happy to do whatever you'd like, and thank you, and sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no, it's cool. Don't apologize. All right. Okay, so let's see here. Also, let me just start off by saying that if any of you have the desire to screenshot anything in order to be able to ask questions about it later, feel free to do it. Okay, let me just resize this. I accidentally messed it up. Give me a sec, sorry. All right. Okay, good. All right. Hey, so this is the presentation on language in art, where I wanted to connect you all with like my connection to my practice, as well as like the value that I see behind language through art history or different ways in which art has encompassed language. Before I actually begin, I just kind of wanted to see how many of us are from a fine arts background. I know that Grace and Violet are both from illustration, correct? Forrest is from art. Riley, what is your major?
I'm a sculpture major.
Cool, cool. And then Olivia, what's your major? You're also animation. Cool. Okay. So yeah, I devised this conversation to be about art and really sort of like what the history of language in art through like conceptual practice is, and how I kind of relate to it. So, the workshop that we'll be doing after this is more or less a series of exercises. So be prepared. Okay, I'll begin. This is the first slide. I will not make any more bad art, as displayed by Bart Simpson. Does anyone know what this phrase is or where it's from? And if so, just chime in. Okay.
If I'm wrong, isn't it? I forget the guy's name, but wasn't there an artist who like trashed all of his work at one point in his career, and he kind of like, I remember him writing that a bunch of times, and that's kind of where he rebooted his career.
That is a fictitious story that gets connected to this piece a lot, but you are getting close to talking about it. Yeah. Okay. So the connection between my work and this image is through the work of John Baldessari, who I'll be talking about in a minute. So conceptual artists and their use of language throughout the 1960s. I wanted to kind of like touch upon some bullet point answers here, or connections that were linked, like what is the connection between art and language in the last 60 years. So repetition and meaning. Does the repetition have an effect on the meaning of your statement? How did the process of writing that statement impact its meaning? And then words and images. Everyone has a different, though often related, association with a word or concept, even when we share a common language. To prove it, draw a picture of a noun, chair, house, or dog, for example, and present it to several friends and family members. Have them guess what the picture represents. Next, draw a picture of a verb, run, think, or fly, for example, and have others guess what that picture represents. Finally, draw a picture of a concept, art, freedom, and community, for example, and have others guess what that picture represents. What pictures were easiest to draw? How did people guess correctly? How did the process of writing the statement impact its meaning? For instance, I like to think about this one because like maybe a lot of us, especially if you're you know, good at rendering something or come from an animation background, the idea of drawing a verb such as running or thinking or flying is totally possible. You know, we've all probably played charades, so we understand what that gesture looks like. Whether or not you draw it correctly can be really confusing. Someone trying to draw flying might draw something like Superman and then immediately start to say superhero rather than flying, just because we don't always associate a person going through air with flying. Maybe we'll associate a plane. So it's visual association. Instructions. So I said hiring, but it doesn't have to be hiring. It could just be like engaging anyone to do something. Hiring people to execute written instructions for works of art. Have someone read instructions, which I've listed below, to you while you carry them out. You'll need a black crayon, a ruler, and a paper. After you're done drawing, switch roles, read the instructions to your partner while he or she draws. Okay, so the instructions would say something like, work from instructions. This is actually a quote that I pulled out. It was 1971, so you'll see what this is pertaining to in a second. Using a black hard crayon, draw a 20-inch square, divide the square into 1-inch squares. Within each 1-inch square, draw nothing, or draw a diagonal straight line from corner to corner, or 2 crossing straight lines diagonally from corner to corner. What are the differences between the images the 2 drawings that you guys made, and how are they interpreted differently? Okay, so all of these ideas are represented in our history through people like John Baldessari. John Baldessari, whose connection to language isn't always prominent in his work, because a lot of his work deals with like color, symbol, and if you haven't seen his work, especially the collage pieces, I highly encourage you to look up his work. He is most famous, well, not most famous, he is famous because he has made this piece that is called "Will Not Make Any More Boring Art." This actually existed initially as a lithograph, and I believe the first one that was ever made wasn't even made using his handwriting. Instead, was made using the student's handwriting that he instructed to do the work. So while it is both by instruction, it is also the idea of repetition changing the image. Humorously enough, I always link this to Bart Simpson, i.e. why the poster has that photo on it. So Baldessari points out that language has made up rules that we agree to follow. Conventional notions of art may be as ingrained, passed down, and unquestioned as rules of language, but artists like Baldessari aim to show that they are equal, arbitrary, and open to interpretation. Baldessari describes his conceptual works as what I thought art should be, not what somebody else would think art would be. You know, received wisdom, what you would get in school. And so a lot of my work was about questioning this received wisdom. This kind of rhetoric or like idea is really applied to a lot of like why I make the work I make, or like how I define my artistic practice. So in my artist talk that I gave last week, like I make drawings daily, and while the drawings are a part of my work, they are not all of what my work is. It just gives me the fuel to go forward with what my connections are to larger projects that I make along the way. Idea of image and text and language could probably best be represented through Joseph Kosuth's 1 and 3 chairs, which is in the MoMA, and it is a mounted photographic print of the chair, the actual chair itself, and then text printed on a plate that explains the definition of chair. So while you have like the connection to image, you have the object, and then you have the language, but to an extent, they're all chair. So it's really just kind of a breakdown of like, what is the visual connection to language? I just really appreciate that, because I think that's something that goes along with my practice, but is also like represented in a bunch of different ways. And then last of the instruction-based thing would be something along the lines of Sol LeWitt. Does anyone know who Sol LeWitt is, or have they ever seen their work? A lot of Sol's work continues to exist long after he's been dead. And it exists because it is usually a series of instructions to make the image. While he is creating images on his own, definitely, he is also creating instructions, or sometimes what I like to call recipes, to make his work. And I use the word recipes because with instruction, you have something that you fulfill and it has to be done, and you would expect it to be done in potentially the perfect, best configuration of that instruction possible. Whereas I think of some of his work as a recipe because I've seen many iterations of some of his instruction-based pieces, and they come out wrong, or they come out differently. And I shouldn't say wrong, because it's not about it being potentially wrong or right. It is about it being misrepresented by the language that was applied to make it. So if you ever just misjudge someone's instructions and you do something out of order, or out of order of operations, you get a different image. And I find this really interesting process of link to his work. So like, I wish that there was something that you could see, like a series of Sol LeWitt projects done wrong or incorrectly. That's a fascination of mine, is like this permission that like instructions give you as an artist. So, okay. Now kind of leading in a little bit to the more abstract side of it, the things that I really enjoy. Other relationships to language and words. This bush, does anyone know what this bush is? Okay, cool. This bush is a forsythia bush. This is concrete poetry. For those of you who don't know concrete poetry, Forsythia is a piece by Mary Ellen Salt. And concrete poetry is, and I just took the basic definition here, is an arrangement of linguistic elements in which the typographical effect is more important in conveying meaning than verbal significance. It is sometimes referred to as visual poetry, a term that has now developed a distinct meaning of its own. Concrete poetry relates more with the visual than the verbal arts, although there is a considerable overlap in the kind of products in which it refers. So in this piece specifically, Forsythia is the base of the pot of the plant. And as the word grows, it grows laterally, vertically, like, so the typographically the word is tilted and now stretches upward, and stands for Forsythia, out, race, spring, yellow, telegram, hope, insists, action, which became kind of like a verbal breakdown poem of how she viewed the plant and its burgeoning livelihood into spring. So I think that this is a really important part of my practice because of how it connects a viewer to seeing something and how you connect to something that is hand-drawn. So in this kind of visual hierarchy, the real object is what would give you a connection to, oh, I understand what this thing is because I see it, whether it's like a car is a car and I can identify a car. And then it kind of breaks all the way down to writing. So when I write the word car, you might envision, you know, your SUV or the car that you grew up driving in, or, you know, that kind of connection to the concrete understanding of the thing, which is very specific, where it becomes kind of like a abstract notion. Of this connection to abstraction also comes in connection to a painter by Twombly. Cy Twombly during World War II was actually a cryptologist because of his connection to language. And he just has like a really funny, he had a really funny history of his connection to language, how he painted his works. So this is one of his paintings. It looks like a chalkboard with scribbles on it. And while it is definitely a painting, I would say it's connected to something called asemic writing. Asemic is a wordless, open, semantic form of writing. The word asemic means having no specific semantic content or without the smallest unit of meaning. I love the idea of asemic writing because while it is an outdated kind of history, which came about in the early 1960s through poets, it is this kind of fascination of like, to what degree as artists or thinkers do we start scribbling something until it becomes this kind of logic or idea that is associated with our practice? And to know that Cy Twombly was a cryptologist thinking about the words, that like the way that words can get hidden in meaning and in language, and his fascination with like ancient dead languages and how they have like been remembered through misinterpretation or interpretation is a really valuable part of how we as creative people think about language. So for instance, like if you are someone who is like an illustration person, like your confusion over how to render something in an illustrative way becomes like an exciting part of your practice, because while it's complicated to say like, oh, I don't know how to direct this idea because it's so abstract, there's different ways in which you can think about what representation looks like to you or to other people. So if you begin to free your interpretation of language by saying like, oh, I need to make something look like it's falling, there's a lot of ways of rendering falling as a verb, but when it's connected to a character, maybe there's something that happens with the visual idea of what falling is, if that can make sense to someone. Also, I just wanted to point out that even with asemic writing, which seems like it is having no specific semantic content or without the smallest unit of, it still responds to maybe how we would think about language. It gets read from top to bottom, to left to right. I think that this painting as an abstract painting doesn't, while it connects you to possibly left to right, it doesn't really mean, it doesn't matter if you go from top to bottom, you know, it's a painting. So another person I kind of wanted to highlight is a psychologist who is a sort of defunct psychologist. His actual branch of psychology is anti-psychology, and his work is pretty outdated, and I would say is not pertinent, but as an artist, I really enjoy it because it gives you an idea of a logic system and how we think about the things that happened in our lives. So he has a book by the name of Knots that I encourage you all to look up, and you can just kind of Google some of these visual ideas. These are charts and graphs, and while sometimes like poems, it is a breakdown of how he thinks about a person's logic and what that says about their psychology and how they approach the world. So in this one, it says, I don't feel good, therefore I am bad, therefore no one loves me. I feel good, therefore I am good, therefore everyone loves me. I am good, you do not love me, therefore you are bad, so I do not love you. I am good, you love me, therefore you are good, so I love you. I am bad, you love me, therefore you are bad. And it's kind of a breakdown of every kind of connection of love and qualitative state of good or bad connected to two individuals and how they interact with one another. And I just think that this is such a great breakdown because, like, while this is rooted in concrete ideas of psychology, and psychologists would completely say it's not, it's funny how much our minds go to this kind of a logic whenever we feel like we're vulnerable or we want to participate in community. This is at least how I get afraid or how I scare myself. I don't know about you guys. This other chart here is also fantastic. Some of his work is usually dictated through arrows of logic, and it says, like, I'm not entitled to what I have, therefore everything I have is stolen, because I'm not entitled to it because I've stolen it, therefore I am not entitled to what I have. So it brings a system of, like, how you see your entitlement, or like what is your connection to how you have an correspondence with something in the world. Okay, and then lastly, I want to kind of dictate, like, actual poetry. So this is a poet who I really like. His name is Aaron Coonan, and part of me would say that his work is, yes, poetry, but it's also like exercises in, like, how we understand language, or like the English language. And his books always have a sort of rhetoric or logic built into it. So his idea of poetry really comes by how to manipulate our connection to language. So in this book called Genius, he breaks down at the very beginning of the book, note on punctuation. In standard usage, quotation marks indicate a conventional distance between speaker and utterance. Words in quotation marks are spoken by a different voice. The quotation marks in this book may retain some suggestion of distance or irony, but their usage follows a new rule. I am using them to track repeated words and phrases. Did you open your mouth to put something in or extract something? The quotation marks around the second something refer to the prior utterance of the same word at the beginning of the line. References are always internal to the poems, and tracking begins anew in each poem. Sources are less clearly marked. In a few exceptional cases, I have used parenthetical citations to name outside sources. Is all technique distance? And then wave, 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 wave is how I would see the visual portion that's at the very bottom of that page. The wave is like a little symbol that he uses in his poems, and while I think it implies an idea of distance, it really just kind of like gives you a visual space to rest your mind and like what your visual connection or your emotional connection to certain words are. And the book is very difficult to read, I'm not gonna lie, because the amount of quotations that go through it, it's like riddled. And it makes you think about like the way in which you use certain words, and it manipulates your mind to think about the malleability of language. So what this all boils down to, in my perspective, is morphology. It questions the idea of the morphology of language and why it's really a valuable thing to question as an artist, or at least in my practice, it's been really important because it gives me a chance to communicate with others. While sometimes I may not be good at communicating verbally, I think my artwork through color and line and shape and text gets through to people in a way where they either recognize that they too have had that feeling, or they have a connection to this phrase that gets stuck inside of their head or inside of their mouth. And I separate those two things because it is the thing in your head that you constantly think about and swirl around, and it makes you maybe bounce off of other things that you see in the world and how you connect to them. And the thing that gets trapped in your mouth usually is the words that you're either, in love with because they sound good, they feel nice in your mouth. The way that your mouth moves or your lips kind of structure to say something, whether it's to yourself or out loud, has a certain sort of intimacy around a phrase. And then also sometimes it is kind of a little bit like telling a secret. So I think of maybe sometimes like, someone such as Mary Ellen Solt, her word has a kind of a secret to it. While yes, it is definitely about spring, this thing that we all know in the world, I think it has kind of a deeper personal connection to this plant and this landscape and this language as a landscape. With morphology, it is the study of the forms of words. So while yes, it is like a breakdown of how we phonetically see something in a book, such as morphology, it is the base of morph, which is the form or structure. So we understand all what morph is, and then this connecting vowel, which helps link us to what is logos, which is the Greek form of logic. And it is to think of form logic of language. And I think that is like, yes, there's something else with morphology that comes into it that is like the English language is not a language based off symbology, whereas like Chinese usually deals more with like the way a character is drawn, and it makes you think about that thing, and it has a certain like history attributed to the painted object of, let's say, fire that might look like a symbol for fire, and that symbology goes towards how you envision that material. In our connection, we're kind of get confused and get lumped together. For instance, we have things like homonyms and synonyms where, meanings get kind of conflated because things mean the same sort of thing while being very different words. And we understand that one word has a tone that says something else about the work, and a tone for this other thing that says the complete opposite feeling, but still mean the same thing. And then a homonym, which is really just the same form of a word that can mean many different things. And a part of my practice comes down to how I interpret these things and like, what does my work do? Maybe a little bit more as like my connection to logic and telling someone a secret. So let me just stop sharing that, and I'll actually just, not to loop this discussion back in, I'll go to my Instagram. So, oh no, excuse me, let me just back up and do this again. My bad. Okay, so like sometimes in my world of making things and thinking about language, I really think a lot about how something can be viewed out in the world. So when I think of a public facing idea, I often go to the idea of a billboard, because a billboard is something that we have a quick relationship to, whether we're seeing it on a highway and we're passing by it, or we're having this long-term relationship where, you know, it's in someone's backyard and we can see it from our house. And at this point, it changes our connection to what those words mean, because, you know, like, we have a relationship with language. And if this thing is really just trying to sell us something that gets advertised in the world, then like, so be it. But there isn't something where it's saying like, oh, I've fallen in love with those words and those words mean something special to me now. When I have projects like this, which has been an ongoing project for probably a decade now, where these pieces get constructed, it becomes something that is like a confession. It is maybe my voice, but really it is the voice of the object that I have made. And it is trying to say something or declare something to a viewer. And we want our everything to be your everything is really just a connection between what we, whether that we is solely me, or it is a community, or it is an idea. It is hoping to fold you, the viewer, in as a participant, someone connected to my reality. And while it is maybe devastatingly intimate, through my artwork, I mean it. And that's how I find my work to exist out in the world as something public. Other times, my connection to image and language comes through in this way where I am obsessive about the way in which something can be both, yes, an image and object, but also like, what is the value of that image and object? So for instance, a piece like this, where you recognize this lined paper, something that has been used in my work for quite a while, you don't quite get to realize from afar or through an image that this is actually a sheet of wood with these lines engraved in it and then filled in with epoxy. And then on top of it, these kind of abstract looking bird things are actually flowers constructed using epoxy, glitter, and graphite. And while these photos are very distinguished because of how like lustrous the material is, in person, it isn't as shiny and looks like graphite. It looks like something that has been drawn very heavily. And it becomes a connection to like thinking of the amount of time it takes maybe to draw, but also the sort of technique that like someone who wants to give you something sweet or intimate, like, you know, say a flower or a cupcake, you begin to think of your connection to, oh, this act of doodling or this act of giving someone something. And I think that it becomes like this like tertiary idea, like, oh, this is like the artist passing a note to me. And whether it is a confession or not is up to me, the viewer. So the last thing I guess I'll say is that, like, I've already talked about the material of this lined paper in the past, but like, this is a medium which I just feel is like pedestrian in the way that everyone knows what it is and you can have a deep connection to it. But also even just on like larger drawings of mine where you become engulfed by the color or the connection to the language, it really is about the scale at which this thing is drawn, where it's much larger and you begin to think about the time it takes to meditate on this gesture or this feeling, and whether or not through its size and the way it uses language as like a connection to the things that you are allowed to say or not allowed to say in public, it gives you this kind of permission. My artwork gives me this kind of permission to just say the thing and have it be okay. Okay. thank you all. I hope this was informative and I got through everything. And you guys can understand my connection to language now, and I hope it influences yours. Does anyone have any questions? I really would enjoy having a conversation.
I'm interested in what you just said. I'm interested in, I saw some of your work and the poem that you showed earlier where, get the name for it, but how the artist, constructive poetry. So how do you organize your words? Would you consider your work constructive poetry, I guess, in some ways when you're using the words like that? Or are you, turning it into something else and are just slightly influenced by that?
You're talking about concrete poetry.
Yeah.
Concrete, I don't personally feel like my work is concrete poetry, but I do feel that my work resides somewhere in the history of thinking about concrete poetry, just because it's like how I choose to visually represent my ideas comes through in a number of ways. These days, I'm really just kind of focusing on the language and whether or not we expect it and how do we respond to it. But the history of concrete poetry really does this interesting job of abstracting our relationships to representation. And I really love that, I think that that's like really valuable as artists and as people in the world, not even artists, because like we begin to think about the way in which language confuses us or can stimulate us to think differently and be more hopeful for the connections that we have. Sometimes in my work, language is used in this way where it seems kind of obscene, to be very honest, but like, that's also some sort of like permission or like some sort of thing that it doesn't feel okay to say out loud. However, like you can still feel it, like there's something grotesque but intimate about it. And I'm not trying to just be like some asshole who says something that they shouldn't. I'm really trying to show you that there's a line for how we connect with someone, like whether it's a thing I have actually said or a thing that I've actually thought. Sometimes my artwork just gives permission for that to exist in the world, whether it's my words or someone else's. Yeah.
Could you go into the inspiration of the print you did most recently? I was curious about the shape related to the image, and just curious what process and concept was with this one specifically.
Okay, so in this one, I will talk about this one specifically, but also this one. This is the proof of this, and the actual print of this is cut to the word bubble. We'll call it a word bubble because that's what it is. And the shapes that I usually reside in, or like how I think about the shapes that happen with these word bubbles, is really more about like how the question comes out of your mouth. It kind of becomes like a tone for which you're saying something, because normally all of the text is handwritten and it's all usually capitalized, which we announce as having like a loud or screaming tone. And a lot of the times I choose to not use punctuation, or in some cases I very, very poignantly have to use punctuation in order to explain like the connection between two ideas. In this print, yes, this shape is cut out of copper in order to become an etching plate that is this size. And the print overall is usually, in this edition, it's about yay big. and its placement on the page. I do something like this to think about like, what is the actual visual space of how this word would look in the world, and how my language or someone else's language would look in relationship to a conversation. So, you know, in this case, this is only about 4 inches by 4 inches, I want to say, and this is not the finalized print. This is just a small edition that I made on handmade paper. But something like this, I would think of on a much larger sheet, where this becomes kind of this like intimate whisper, where the color goes from something that might make you think of like shadow or darkness to almost fleshy like ideas of someone's skin, while also at the same time being something that looks like it could be like the very last moment of a sunset. And my logic behind this was that it needs to make someone think about their mouth and like, what is the boundary? What are the boundaries of the mouth? Yes, this thing again, like, is grotesque, maybe as an idea to some people, but it's also like the onus of giving permission for something that seems obscene and being able to admit it does something for not only the person who's saying it, but also for the people who are reading it. Because yes, you can be grotesque, you can find something grotesque, but you can also find the humor or the actual agreements that you might feel for that. I made this piece specifically, and Fiona Apple's name is used, yes, because of her character and who she is, a musician, but I have used it previously in another piece several times, just because of like my connection to her as a child, and also as an adult. Yeah, does that answer your questions? Does that answer all the questions?
I think so, yeah. That was thank you.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, you know, something like this, while it is it becomes a sketch for something really quick, where I think about like, this is the amount of space that this really terrible thing that like manipulates your feelings every day just takes up. So it becomes about more of the space and the size of the word bubble because of how I'm feeling.
So when you're working, how much thought are you putting into going into it, or do you just, you start writing the words on the paper and then, kind of comes together? Like, where does the start to finish kind of go on a project like this?
Because these drawings are done every day, the scope in which I am connected to varies. So for instance, like this piece, it varies. So a piece like this, the things that I like to do for my practice are, I have a constant collection of notes on my iPhone, where yes, I'm writing things to myself and also writing down the things that I hear, but I'm also thinking about instances and essentially making kind of like a play in my head. Sometimes there's moments in our lives as people where we think like, oh man, I wish I said that. And they become those moments, but they also become like, not as like a, oh, I want to like get back at you, but it's like I wish I had realized in that moment I had said it, because I wished I had that thought. That thought is what was the most valuable thing about this moment. Other times they're long format things that I have to put a lot of thought in. This one I would say is more like, I visually understood this as an idea before I decided I would ever make it. Probably sat on my phone for a long time because of the idea, if I read it out loud, like, tear the heart, 2 tears. One, the idea of the word tiers is flipped because you can think of two tiers as in like the tier of a standard, meaning like it was TIER, so like a tier down here and a tier up here, which is why I use a comma and a punctuation mark in order to separate the two ideas. But then tear the heart, which if you take a heart and you tear it into two, you have two tiers. It becomes like a visual pun while also thinking about to the words that you're trying to put out of your mouth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's very interesting. So like in this one, when you're choosing your colors, are you thinking more from a functional point of view, or are you thinking more of a expression using the colors and to relate to the words specifically or abstractly? Or
I'm thinking about the sort of a fade that you would use when you're going through an idea. So if you close your eyes and I tell you tear the heart to tears, you probably go from thinking about the color red to thinking about the color blue. And while that is a very simple gesture, it also gives you a way to unlock or interpret the language that I'm using in my work.
Okay, I really like that.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes the ways in which I have to think about like a scenario or a poem becomes really about like the ways in which we associate color to a space. And while this might read as a poem, sometimes it just reads as a list. So, you know, visually you have sunset and then you have sun, you have a set of something, and then shifting shoulders could be like a fidget or a motion. Gay light is usually like an idea where like I can break all these things down one at a time, or I can break it down as a whole thing and you think about, oh, this is like the moment right after the sun sets and it just becomes dark and things start coming out, you know? And the things that come out aren't always like what you expect them to be, but it's the scene that you're in, and you know, it's comfort, I guess.
Would you consider your process cathartic when you're doing these paper word practices that you do?
That's a great question. Yes, I think of them as cathartic, and the catharsis doesn't come from showing them on Instagram or something, because like I said, it's a daily practice, so I don't always have to show them. It's cathartic in the way because I'll get to something that I do, and then days later I'll realize like this really simple thing I made for myself while I'm like also working on a sculpture. This is where the art starts, you know, like this is where I'm like, oh shit, that's the idea that I wanted. That's the moment I was feeling. So yeah, I would call it cathartic.
I feel that.
Yeah. I mean, as an artist, it's really confusing because catharsis has to like be built into your practice, right?
Yeah, definitely. I find I try to do the same drawing every day, and I find that very cathartic. But when it comes to making my more, you know, official work, I feel like the process becomes a little different. You know, the looseness of a loose leaf to the, you know, difference in using a different medium that's going to require more time, I feel like kind of impedes or changes the cathartic effect of expression.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, I had to so years ago I gave a lecture in Spain about my work, and they really wanted to just ask me like, what is your artwork about? And I don't know. Like sometimes I don't know, because you know, the more you make the things that you make, you don't know what your artwork is about. But I realized like, my artwork at that time, I was like, oh, my artwork is either about falling in love or falling out of love. And I'm not saying that like it is got to be one or the other. It's like it can be both simultaneously at the same time, which is a really hard explanation to like get through, you know. Other languages have more complex words for feelings and stuff, whereas like by the English language, we can be limited. And the point of some of the things that I make, especially these notebook drawings, there's value in something feeling confessional. And because once you see someone kind of admitting something to you, you don't necessarily feel like you've been taken for granted. You feel like you're a part of something. And I hope that that comes through with my practice, whether it's really simple or really, really complex. Like, you know, I think that, you know, I can make sculptures that exist in the world like this and not utilize any written language. However, there is an idea of language that we apply to things. For instance, we know that this is a bed because it looks like a bed. We know that probably through these ridges that you see on the bed, it was milled on like a giant milling machine. And it seems like it went from being straight from a tree to like just being cut down. And when I made all of this, I cut all of this wood down and then I milled all of these using a sawmill. And it was really important to go from like the very first step of working at a sawmill to growing this grass in this thing, to have this be this kind of intimate object where you think about, you know, all of the activities that happen in bed, but also you think about like, what is your connection to just laying down in a public place and like the vulnerability that comes with that. It doesn't have to be just one thing. I think the interpretations are important. And like, you know, while you can think about like the vulnerability of sex, like you also think about like just what it's like to be in public and be a person who is, you know, going through the world. And, you know, I think that comes through in a lot of things that I write. Like, while things do seem obscene at times, there's moments where like this is supposed to be almost feel cautionary. Like, yes, this can be sexy, but it can also look like it's some sort of like lit up sign that you would see in a window that, you know, if you can fit something in, if you can fit your hand in something's mouth, it's usually a bad sign, or it's usually a dangerous thing, you know?
Yeah.
You don't put your hand in the mouth of a lion and expect to have it when it comes out, you know? Like,
No, not unless you're a professional.
Yeah, so it's like, I think having the confusion of like something that seems incredibly deeply intimate, but also have it be a little scary is really valuable. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm curious so the seed bed and what you're saying about words and how, you know, changing the way we interpret words is definitely an interesting task. So I'm interested what you think about titling works like seed bed, because if you read seed bed, you think bed, but if you don't read seed bed, what would people see?
You know, I also use titles in different ways to be quotations. So like seedbed is actually a quote from the title of a Vito Acconci piece. So Vito Acconci made a performative piece called Seedbed that was a very obscene thing that happened inside of a gallery, where he made a false floor and was constantly speaking through a microphone while being like naked and doing gross or saying gross things underneath this platform that existed in the space. And it became this kind of like very durational long-term performance. And to me, that's important, but I don't find it to be valuable for others to get that out of the work, you know? Because like the idea of the title of this piece coming through as Seedbed, Splendor in the Grass. Splendor in the Grass is a 1960s cautionary movie about romance, psychology, and like sex before marriage. But also like the idea of a seedbed is like where something comes out of, where something grows. And like there can be the flipping or the pun that has to do with like semen, but it's also really still about the grass. Like you get to think about the intimacy of growing the grass and laying down in it.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that. I never heard of that guy. Sounds like Barry Alan GG something. There used to be this. You know what I'm talking about? There's this crazy musician like. I don't know,
GG Allen.
Yeah, GG Allen. That's who he reminds me of.
Yeah.
Crazy dude.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're explaining that piece to people, then would you stray away from the, that more formal relationship you have with it to the more expressionist, where you've taken it, or depending on who you're talking to, you'd switch it up?
This is okay. I have a question for you. How do you define that question? Like, how do you define like what is the formal aspect of that? Yeah.
Well, I'm always torn with titling things because you title something and then people are going to infer something. I usually go about my titles with just like, if I think about it, it's kind of like a Freudian slip, comes in and then I put it down. So I kind of do it as like a little sign. Like I kind of try to lead people in a very abstract way that may not even be taken. So personally, like I don't think explaining a title of my work would really pertain to what I'm doing, because I'm interested in just the, what people can see in the jumbled mess I make. But with something this formal, the seeing seedbed, not knowing about the history of the seedbed, just hearing seedbed and looking at it, my mind straight goes to bed. And I don't know if I would think bed when I saw it at first.
I mean, it's kind of, I mean, some people might disagree with you. I don't want to like completely neglect your question to me about the titles, but like, I don't know, Riley, Grace, someone else, Lisa, like if you see that piece and you hear the title seed bed, do you think about bed, or do you think like, what does the title direct you to think about as a viewer? And just at the end of it, is the title as important? Is something that I think is valuable for a lot of artists to like talk about, because, I'm of the opinion that like if your artwork comes down to what the title is at the end, like maybe you've done something wrong in the math, like something's wrong with the magic that you've made, because for me, the title becomes the final thing that happens in order for me to negotiate how I feel about something, or like my politics behind making something. And sometimes that's like really difficult because, there's already language in a lot of the work I make. So
I only ask because I was just working on a piece recently, and I was, referencing some like past, artists from like, I have like a reference to Bosch, I have a reference to Mondrian, I got some vague references to pointillism, and I was talking to people about it. And I kind of realized that maybe like taking my work with those references to that level, to people who don't know art and stuff, kind of seemed above and beyond and kind of almost like superfluous, in what I was doing. But I like the idea of utilizing that like in a subtle way, the way you're doing it with seed trees. But I'm just curious, because I'm still on the fence about titles and how they should be valued versus what you're actually creating visually.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your initial question, I think this answers your initial question. I can't even remember the initial question now.
Can I be honest?
Okay. Well, titles, for me, titles come at the end. And I think that they're valuable because they help sway the viewer into thinking or feeling one way or the other. And that's fine. But, the title is supposed to do this thing where, in my opinion, it just kind of finalizes like what you've done. Like once something has a name, it's over.
Yeah.
So, at
No,
least that's what?
No, I get that. I feel that. No, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Does anyone else have any other questions?
So
I like having these.
I just want to jump in. It's Lisa here, and I don't know if anyone else on the call wants to continue the conversation, but I just wanted to be mindful of the time. It's 7:24, and I thought that the workshop was going to start at 7:15. So if Forrest, if you could just step in and just, what is the situation? Are there people waiting for the workshop, or should we call this the workshop? I don't know exactly how to proceed, but I put some comments in the chat about this conversation for anyone to look at. And then Riley, Grace, anyone else on the call could respond to Tommy. But first, if we could just hear from Forrest about the plan for the workshop.
Could you elaborate on your statement that catharsis has to be built into your practice? Okay. So like, I think it's really important for artists of any kind for catharsis to be built into your practice, because it's like, one, do we all know what catharsis is? Sorry, let's just be nerd. Yeah, okay. So like, already you guys are all to some degree an artist, and regardless of like what your background it is, I would say 90% of the time, it's hard to explain to your parents that you're an artist. And I say that jokingly, but I mean it seriously, because it's like with finding catharsis in your the process of releasing and thereby providing relief from strong or repressed emotions, from strong or repressed emotions, excuse me. It's important because it gives you something to self-actualize and to realize that you're doing through your artwork. You know, the funny thing about art is that you can give someone else catharsis just by making it. And finding catharsis in your own practice is important because, like, at the end of the day, regardless of what kind of artist you are, it still has to be for you. And, you know, like, there's even graphic designers who just like will design something for themselves. And, you know, maybe over time it becomes a style or a brand of who you're getting as a designer. But it's really important because, like, it gives you the opportunity to realize that you're putting something out there that's valuable. And I think, you know, it's good to have that be built into your practice, because, you know, you got to be okay with doing it for yourself before you do something for others. So, and that can be for anyone, whether it's like a sculptor, or painter, or illustrator, you know, whatever. Yeah. And then what else do you write in here? Vito Conci is better known for his following piece. I think the title is Framing Commerce. Yeah. I mean, Vito Conci just had a very crazy practice in general, and, you know, I don't completely agree with all of his histories of work, but, you know, it's great work, and you should all check out Vito Conci's work. His later work gets really strange because he became kind of a de facto architect, and how that functions in his practice is very strange. So check that out.
It's fascinating. He started out as a poet too.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, you don't have to be one thing. Any other questions? Okay.
So I just wanted to jump in because I see that Forrest is texting or me that he's having technical difficulties. So it is, I know that the workshop, again, just trying to follow the structure, was theoretically starting at 7:15, and I'm not sure if some of the people on the call now are waiting to participate in that. But I know, so we're only got about 45 minutes, if that, left. How did you want to proceed? Can I be of any assistance? Do you want to show their faces and say hello, or how do you want to manage that?
So there's a phone number here that's very confusing to me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 8. Is the phone number a person?
That might be.
Hello?
Forrest. Hi, Forrest. Is that you on the telephone?
Yes, my computer decided to have a panic attack and nothing decided to work. So I am here now. I'm so sorry about that. What did I miss?
Not a lot. You didn't miss a lot.
It was very interesting conversation about catharsis, etc. So are you ready to, how about the whole idea of the workshop? Should people start writing something? Should they show their faces? I don't know what the plan is.
So my plan was.
Go ahead,
Tommy. Oh, okay. My plan was to do a kind of a pretty quick exercise for people to think about language and how it works to their practice. And it's in 2 phases. It's like a quick exercise to get everyone like warmed up and started to do something. And then the second half is like a collaborative or cooperative thing that 2 people can do together. So, you know, it's fine. It's really just a set of instructions, and I'll do it with you guys, or you guys can try it out later, or we can not do it at all. It's totally up to you.
I'm down. I'm pretty sure I sent everything in. So yeah, I'm down to do the exercise.
I gotta actually go. But it's been great talking to you guys. Great talking to you, Tommy.
Yeah, great talking to you. Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for all the questions.
Yeah, thanks for answering them. Hopefully I see you sometime in Brooklyn.
Yeah, please keep in touch. Feel free to bug me.
Good night, Anthony. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here. Have a good one, guys.
Take care.
So you've got Grace, Violet, Riley, Olivia, Forrest, and I'm hanging around too, Lisa.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So
and I can be out on I can just observe. If you're
okay.
pairing people up.
Well, so what I would request is that everyone have some sort of writing, drawing surface and something that you can boldly draw with that is hopefully a Sharpie, if you guys have that.
Austin.
Yes. Olivia, is that you?
Yeah, I need to go.
What's that, Olivia?
I need to go.
Bye, Olivia. See you next time.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
Thanks for your questions before, Olivia. Take care.
You too, thanks.
Okay. Also, I just want to point out right now that everyone should take a moment to recognize that Violet and Grace are sitting right across from each other and having to do this on a Zoom. So this has got to be a really funny interaction for 2 roommates to have. So, or are you guys, I'm trying to think about the architecture of this room. I'm not seeing the lights behind Violet reflected in the window behind Grace. So
I'm like,
y'all are...
it's like an L. So like, there's...
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, there you go. I was right. Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. I just point that out because I have students in another class that 3 of them live together, and I had no idea until one day they just like, one of them got up and like moved the camera around. I was like, the hell's going on? This is the weirdest show. I didn't know this is the show I was watching. It's like being in on somebody else's sitcom, you know? Okay, so. Actually, do you guys mind waiting like 1 minute for me to get some more water? Because I've just been talking this entire time. Is that cool?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Am I missing something? Why did everybody get quiet?
Right, because we're all envisioning and meditating on the image of Tommy Coleman reaching the water and letting it douse his throat.
Oh my God.
I mean,
You did that earlier today, and I kind of started taking you serious for a minute. Or no, not earlier today, yesterday.
wait, you think I had a dog once that was so small, not that small, but had silky fur, and I had half the kids in the neighborhood convinced it was a cat because when they would when they got near to it, I would make a meowing sound because the dog never barked. So I called it was a special breed of cat dog. The kids were like in high school before they realized it wasn't a cat dog.
That's funny.
I'm also a witch on Halloween. I used to ride my bike through the neighborhood as the sun set with my broom dragging behind it.
Oh, that must have been a really good look for you, Lisa.
It was fantastic, and I cackle too. Not on demand, but now I have a microphone because my cackle is a little smaller than it used to be. So my husband always gets annoyed, but I drag an amplifier out on the front porch every Halloween.
Oh my God.
If you're not doing anything on Halloween, I can always use backup witches.
I believe my witch calendar is full, but thank you very much.
I've imported relatives to be backup witches.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Tommy, before you say anything, did you ever dress up for Halloween, and what did you dress up as?
Oh yeah, I dressed up for Halloween extensively. When I was a child, for some reason, my family continuously dressed me up as a bunny. So there's like 5 to 10 different years of me just being a bunny. Like, I don't know. It's like I was a bunny for everything. Like, I don't understand
for
how
Easter,
that
for sure.
Yeah, for Easter, I was a bunny, and like I found out the hard way that kids don't dress up for Easter, so I just got made fun of a bunch. And then, you know, like there's something really absurd about like a small child that's just a bunny many, many years in a row. But other than that, I also dressed up a lot as like I was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle at one point, and
ooh,
yeah, I was afraid of Halloween when I was young, and now I would say Halloween's definitely one of my favorite holidays.
Oh yeah,
actually,
it's the best.
Can I tell you about Joy Seward for just a minute? She really liked rabbits. She was an artist at VCU, and she actually created a rabbit man, and then she had a ceremony and she got married with him, and she sent out like marriage wedding photos and everything of her marriage to Mr. Rabbit.
That's kind of wild. Who is this individual?
Joy Seward. She actually lived in Brooklyn for a long time, but unfortunately, she is not alive.
Very sorry.
Oh!
Yeah, there you go. This is one Easter when I was a child. I just got dressed up as a rabbit and I was totally cool with it. Yeah. This happened more than one time, as I said previously. So I have no shame. No. You guys have seen my art, so you'll see a bunch of other crazy things.
Who made the carrot?
Oh, my mom, probably. Yeah. My mom is a very creative individual. Just to also give you guys a little bit more of a background, like my father is a bartender and he shines shoes at a country club, and my mom was a food delivery person for a long time and has worked multiple jobs, and she just like splices orchids and like grows plants and occasionally sells those these days. But like my mom is so creative and a really big inspiration for like why I make stuff, just because her life is so wild. My life has been so crazy, so I'm like always motivated stuff. Like how I respond to the world is through like probably like my relationship to family and friends. So
That's
yeah.
so sweet.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's got to have like the weird inspirations that, you know, get into their work, whether it's something as simple as familial behaviors or like the way they live their life. Okay, so let me try to start this again. Okay, does anyone have any questions before we start? Or just, you know, it doesn't even matter what the questions are. No? Okay, cool. Okay, a quick exercise. So I'm going to give you 6 words here, and you'll have 10 to 15 seconds to draw forms of what these words mean to you on a piece of paper as I display them on the screen. The words that I'll show you, should try to draw them in a non-representational factor or not respond using any language. Instead, think about the shapes that they make you think about, the perspectives they make you think about, and maybe the tone or size of the drawing that you produce. And it's important that you make them quickly. And by the time it's ready for the next one, you should move on to the next one, regardless of where you're at. Also, it might help if you number the drawings 1 through 6, and you keep track of which one's which, okay? So let me start a stopwatch. Is everyone ready?
Tommy, real quick.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, my computer is not showing me anything, probably because it's being slow. Could you say the word for me?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, anyone else? No questions? Okay, cool. Everyone's ready?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so number 1, self. So 10 to 15 seconds, and I'll tell you when the next one comes up. Okay, next one. Number 2, ephemeral. Okay, number 3, stop. Okay, number 4, noise. No, this is 5, excuse me, 4. This is 4. Okay. Number 6, break. All right. And the final one, break. Spelled B-R-A-K-E. Okay, stop. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing for 1 second. So I don't think you can do this, Forrest, because you won't be able to show us, but if you have a way of showing us through your computer or something, that would be really helpful. Okay, so for these responses, a part of this exercise is that, yes, I'm going to try to predict a little bit of what you guys drew, but also I want to understand, or I want us to all see how like we have a certain sort of response or a logic, how we think about these either very direct visual interpretations or these very abstract interpretations. So for self, I would like to see all of what you guys have drawn, and I imagine that it might be a silhouette of yourself, or it is a mirror. If you've drawn something, I would say circular maybe, if it's non-representational. Okay, cool. Cool, okay. So blob with heart / circle with ellipses that goes into an inner circle. Okay. Riley? Okay. A sleepy looking, wait, what is, Lisa, hold it lower. Oh, okay, so you quickly drew a very abstract representation of yourself. So, okay, we're all dictating these things based around some sort of shape that we identify as us, and then we assume or associate some sort of feeling with that shape. Whether it is like a kind of a quick representation of yourself, or it is actual like a heart or a grimacing kind of a face almost. So then ephemeral, I'll think of the idea of ephemeral as something that is spacey or a dotted sort of a kind of a line. Let's see what we have drawn for ephemeral. Okay, it looks a little chaotic. Okay, it also looks a little chaotic, but splashing, dot, dot, dot. And then what looks like something like ripples on a pond. So, okay, let me just ask here, Grace, why do you think of ephemeral as this like little spurts of sweat or something?
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even know what it meant. I kind of just went with what it sounded like.
Okay, cool. Violet, what about you?
I think
You're good. Just keep talking.
Okay, so that might be a little trickier. We'll see what happens.
You're just talking through mine.
I think it's an echo that goes around into my computer out of hers, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But I think I also kind of mixed up the word with ethereal.
Oh yeah, I think I did that too, actually. Like ethereal.
Oh, ethereal.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Riley, what about you? How did you end up at dot, dot, dot?
I knew that it meant like short, and I thought like an ellipsis or something that looked kind of like that could be interpreted as like any type of length. And so I just went with open circles. Little.
Okay. Cool. Lisa, you resorted to chaos.
Well, I didn't think of it quite as chaos. I thought ephemeral is sort of like you can't really grab onto it like a cloud, right? You know, so it's not really tangible. So that's what I thought of, especially after this thing, the self that was so tangible. So it was.
So now for number 3, stop. I imagine half of you have probably drawn a stop sign or something that looks like an octagon. Correct? Let's see what we have. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay, so we have one stop sign and you have a hand sort of that indicates stop. Correct, Violet? Yeah, okay. So Lisa thinks of stop as kind of some sort of cage-like surface. Would you qualify that as a cage, Lisa, or a fence?
I saw it as, yeah, like a fence. Like I should have gone off the edge of the paper, you know, something.
No, this is a quick drawing. So when we hear the word stop, we all probably think of that shape because that's the thing that we have. But first, we probably think of the color red, correct? Or am I making that up? Yeah. So then thinking about stop as something that you can communicate in an almost kind of like universal nature, how do we communicate what we think of as noise? So let's move on to the next one, because I would say that we all have different definitions of an idea of noise. Okay, so while noise, I would say Riley's image relies upon an ear to think about how we interpret the information. We're also thinking a lot about what looks like rhythm still, because it is a repeated pattern. And whether or not that's like intentional, it's interesting that noise in this case seems like it has a unifying sequence. Whereas something like Lisa or Grace's, which is a fairly chaotic thing, and we can find rhythm in it, we're probably visually thinking about noise as like the actual sound that it might produce while making those drawings. Because like noise isn't just the thing that we're hearing, it also is a visual idea, which kind of makes me think a little bit about where we land on with Violet's piece. Because Violet's idea of noise seems a lot to rely on like a shape, and I would like to hear why noise, or like why you resided on that shape, Violet, if you could explain.
Okay. We're avoiding the echoes. Well, I sort of went for the shape as something that sort of spreads out and get bigger, and then I wanted to keep going out with sort of the ripples in the pond thing again. Because to me, like, noise can become very all enveloping.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so your relationship to noise is really finding it almost as like one big thing, more so than made up of lots of little things.
Sometimes, yeah. I do have sensory, I can experience sensory overload from noise. So sometimes it just all becomes one thing, and it's too many quick little things to think of as more than one thing.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Right. And then the last two are the homonyms break and break. So how do we understand break, as it is probably something that seemed a little similar to like breaking of an egg or like a shattering of something where we think about the pieces of a whole, correct? Yeah, so now I want to know, like, when you hear in the quick succession, I want to see both of your drawings, but like, how did you feel after you heard break again? Was there a pause? Do you feel like you misheard something the first time, or what? Yeah.
It's exactly what you just said. I thought I questioned my hearing or my reading.
Yeah. So it becomes like a moment where logic kind of breaks down. But if you guys could try to hold up the drawings that you made for both break and break, I would like to see if I can do both of them. Okay, so break and break. Okay, so in the case of Riley's, where it's almost like a representation of break as something that looks broken, and then something that also looks like it's a brake pedal coming from your perspective, that's the most representational idea of it. Whereas like, well, I mean, you all kind of drew break in the same way, where it's a representative thing. The break as in shattering something. But Grace, could you kind of explain how you think of break, the notion of stopping is your sixth one?
I kind of thought of it as like establishing like tension between like this object and this object, and like the weight of this holding this back as like stopping it.
Okay. Yeah.
Like a
So, okay. So for something like break, when you're not kind of just drawing a visual representation of a brake on a car, you have to think about the interaction between us and something else, because usually break is the kind of a verb where we think about something that we've done, or something that has to happen. Okay, so while that's like linked to what we first probably talked about with the language exercise of like thinking about how to visually interpret a verb, I would like to move on to the very complex side of this workshop. And we can kind of do it quickly just because there's a few of us, and if you have any questions before we actually do it, let's talk them out. So here's the instructions. Come up with a question that you have about your own work or your own interest in art making. Think about how it makes you feel, how it makes you react. Think about the amount of space the question takes up in your head or on a page. 2, you will have 60 seconds to draw a non-linguistic, no text, and non-representational, no image of a noun. So, no more drawing a brake of a car or anything like that. Version of what you think that question actually is or looks like. Attempt to make your drawing as expressive and emotive as possible. So for this one, you'll have a whole minute. At the end, what you're going to do is you're going to show this drawing to the class, all of us, and do not state what the question is or what you've thought about while drawing this, okay? So you need to find a way of making this drawing feel like a question, and also really try to embody what the question you have is by the way it looks through whatever means you have that are not using words and not using something representational. And I will make the 60 seconds right now. Okay, time. All right. So let me just move to this next slide really quick. So what I want us all to do is to, Lisa, are you still here? Oh, okay. Whoa, okay. So what I want us to do is I want us to not yet tell anyone what the questions were. And I would like to see how your visual question looks. So if you can show it, please do so now. Okay. Okay. All right. So because Grace and Violet are in the same room with one another, Riley, I'm going to pair you with Lisa. And what I would like you guys to do is think of it as your duty to look at the person's rendering and draw a response to what you think that person's question is. So everyone take a moment to look, and then I would like you guys to start. So
Riley, can I get a little closer? Thank you. Still can't see it, Riley. Oh, there we go.
okay. So think of this drawing as a question and respond now. You will have a minute. Okay, time. Lisa, are you still there?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I keep turning the thing off.
No, it's okay. It's really fine. So now if you guys could all take a moment to visually display, just show me what you drew in response to the person's drawing. Okay, so now Riley and Lisa, if Riley can show us the first one, Grace and Violet, you guys can put yours down for a moment. I would like Riley and Lisa to try to explain how they communicated these two ideas through drawing.
You want Riley to
So-
start or me to start?
Yeah, Riley, I want Riley to start.
Okay. Should I say the question or no?
I want you to say it second, but first I'd like you to look at what Lisa made first and think about how you responded to her piece with the second piece. And
These
then I
are,
want
these
you
are
to
both
say,
about Riley's.
Yeah.
excuse me?
Oh wait, I'm confused. I'm sorry. So wait.
Oh, okay. So that's your response to Lisa's first piece. And I
Yeah.
would like to see, like, Lisa, if you could show your first one, that'd be great.
Oh, okay.
And Riley, if you could explain how you responded to Lisa's and what you think Lisa's question is, I would like to know.
So I saw like I couldn't tell if the circle was like was like a see-through circle or if it was just dark. And then I saw the other thing as kind of like a sun of sorts. And I took hers as being like, is this light or dark enough? Or like almost like representationally, like, does this have like too much like deep dark meaning, or is it more like light and like an airy sort of piece, you know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. What do you think her question is, Riley?
I think her question is like I I don't know. I thought like her question would be something along the lines of like, is this too much?
Okay. And now, Riley, if you don't mind, Lisa, can you tell us what your question was?
Oh, sure. It's what should I focus on, the global or the local?
Oh,
Okay.
So I'm sort of thinking of the empty space, you know, there is a circle, and then it's represented again as the little dot there around a similar size thing. But that's the whole idea of micro macro. So it's like I never know where I feel constantly torn by things of the world, huge, you know, global issues versus like, you know, just doing something right on my block. So anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So constantly concerned with scale in the situation. So then, Lisa, if you could look at Riley's first one and respond to it and what you think Riley's question was.
Yeah, I thought that it was about the idea of finding a path and you know, getting a direction and having a lot of you know, so I guess really it's less of an identification of her question and more of an interpretation of what I thought she was sort of representing. And it seems like you know, confusion and kind of trying different things, and but still there's a bit of a pattern there.
Okay, so Riley, do you want to tell us what your question was?
yeah. So my question was, is this good enough? Because that's a question I currently ask myself a lot when doing works, because I do a lot of welding works and like welding pieces, and I just consistently think like, is this good enough to put out? Like, is this good enough to whatever?
May I say something else about Riley's piece when that drawing is up close?
Yeah.
So I think that, go ahead close again, Riley. When you just showed it up really close, I saw it very differently than when I saw it before we had to do the drawing. And I didn't realize your line use is so beautiful. Come closer, I still can't really see it. There's like there's a grace to the chaos there. I don't know. And so I feel like I don't like if I had mine to do over again, I would do a looser interpretation of that. I think that these are sort of, I don't know. I like your drawing, your marks.
Okay, so there's things I wanted to say at the end, but I actually kind of want to say them now. Is that through this exercise, what I really hope for some people to get out of it is that like the questions that they have about their own work is the kind of drawing that goes into that feeling is usually, to me, the sort of actual content that you need to make the work out of. And while I know that this is just like a little doodle on a piece of paper, I usually find this to be like the best place to start, because it's like the doodle that you make in order to figure out what the real question is that you have. I know the thing of like, is this good enough, is constantly in the back of our minds, because as people and as artists, we're usually so consistently focused on the qualitative and like what we're doing is enough. But I think of like, if you can start with these small gestures and find a way of incorporating the small squiggle or the doodle into your practice in a bigger or more meaningful way, it starts to lead to answers that you have with your own practice. So I would like to repeat what we just did with Grace and Violet. If you guys could show maybe Grace show your question to Violet, and Violet can respond what they think the question is. Okay, so this is Grace's first one. And Violet, what was your response?
My response.
Okay. So Violet, what do you think Grace's question is?
I'm kind of sort of like trying to figure out which different areas you fall into and how much you're a part of them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can understand that visually, especially this relationship. Maybe it's different because you guys live together, but there's something very interesting about Grace's question of what something that looks like a puddle or like a small thing that resides on a surface or doesn't seem to go into anything. And you have now redrawn it from the perspective of thinking about looking at the vessel that's pouring it. And I want to know just like how much of that is like important to the call and response of these two drawings. Do you feel like that is the accurate depiction, Grace?
Yeah, that was like spot on. It's like kind of like, it was like my creative integrity, like where does it really lie? Like I don't really know like my true area yet, or if I even need to have one specific area.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty crazy because I can like totally understand this just by looking at these two images side by side. And to know that they're from two different people, it's like really, wow, it's pretty good. So Violet, if you could show your drawing. And that's your question. And Grace, this is your response to Violet. Grace, if you could kind of explain how you see your response and what you think Violet's question is.
I was kind of thinking like she has like this dark mass above like a couple other boxes and shapes. So I thought maybe that could have signified like pressure and stress based on like, I don't know, certain ideas of hers or her creative journey.
And in Grace, in your drawing of this question, you have attributed this black square as being the chaos. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Okay. So then, Violet, what's your question?
She's not really too far off. My question is kind of, what do I want? And so.
What do you want?
Yeah.
Okay.
Trying to figure out like, what do I really, really want to do? What do I want to portray? What?
Mm-hmm. So how much of these two pieces do you think that like that's something that you think about all the time and that's just why Grace picks up on it because you guys live together? Or do you think that these are like valid visual interpretations and responses to how you guys feel?
Like,
it's a big question, I know.
Do you mean like, are we surprised that
Yeah,
understand this?
yeah.
I feel like we haven't had that many conversations about it really.
Not really.
Yeah. Yeah. So I enjoy doing this exercise as like a thing that I do on the first day with my students, just because it has this ability to kind of get your anxieties out. And while it gives you the opportunity to empathically bond with someone else, I think it's also just really valuable to recognize that like language or the thing that we are allowed to say or not say can come through in different ways. Like it doesn't have to just be words, it can be a shape, because there's a lot of validity in how you want to draw a shape and how that expresses like your fears or your anxieties. And I mean, I really do feel like you two like hit the nail on the head. So I'm like really grateful to see the two work side by side.
Yeah, can I add something to what I said before though?
Yeah.
It's like the reason why I said she really wasn't all that far off at all was because this question has sort of been coming from the pressure and stress of the pandemic
Yeah.
and just this
Oh, from the pandemic.
experience of this past year.
Mm-hmm. But do you find some kind of like empathy in, or do you find relief in the way that Grace can make a drawing that reiterates your feelings?
A little bit. It's like interesting to see how it's reflected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of psychology experiments over the last like 100 years where, you know, when people use things like the inkblot drawings, like an inkblot drawing is, while completely abstract, it is also something that produces the idea of an image for us to associate with a memory that we've either had, where it almost becomes like the image is not even important anymore because it's giving us the trigger of how we think about a memory. And in this case, we're kind of doing the opposite. We are giving a memory or like just something that is a constant feeling and assigning it a shape and a space or you know, some sort of value or attribute that gives us the opportunity to like isolate that feeling and put it in a place. And I mean, maybe you two are more adept at it because you live together, but also because you guys are both from backgrounds where you think about illustration as a way of communicating with people. And like, I think that isn't just limited to illustration. I think that's just maybe the idea of visual language. Like, you might both just be very strong at having a relationship with visual interactions, you know. If you ever have the opportunity to exercise this again with like a group of people and you're around a group of people or have a Skype with a group of people, kind of shaping this exercise the way you want to is really important. But the thing that I've learned is the exercise of having the first like 6 drawings is a good way of introducing people to the drawing fast, the not having to like think as hard about what you want. And then once you as an artist are faced with a really big question, like what is the biggest question of your work right now, it gives you space to be vulnerable while also being forward about how you want to draw. And like I said previously, if you can now take some of these drawings and actually use them to inspire other things that you want to make, I find that to be a part of the catharsis in my work. So that's the end of my workshop.
This is fantastic.
That's how I work.
It's perfect timing. It's 2 hours. It's another hour. Thank you so much for your devotion tonight. This has been really educational for me, and also I'm sure that the students really seem to be very engaged. I was just going to share the screen for 1 minute and ask if the remaining people would consider, if you have time on Friday, coming to the mini Sculpture X Friday. This is the 5th, and you just go to our website, sculpturex.org. We've been around for 10 years. We have a free symposium every year, and this last one was all virtual, and the students who were involved with it wanted to do another mini one. So it's just for one afternoon, but if you're gonna, these are the Zoom connections. But I'm telling you right now, these emerging artists, they're 5 people. One's in Colorado, one's Toronto, one's West Virginia. These students were picked by other students to give short talks on their work, and they're literally 6 minutes and 40 seconds each. And so I think it's very inspirational. One's an undergraduate at Carnegie Mellon right now, and then one's a graduate student teaching. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure you knew about Sculpture X. And Tommy, thank you so much. I hope you get some rest, and I hope that you work things out with your studio situation in Brooklyn. That's a really
Thanks.
unpleasant thing to be thinking about.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, so I'll figure that out. But thank you very much. I hope you all have a good evening. And Grace, Violet, it was so wonderful to be able to talk to you guys again. Feel free to reach out if there were any questions or just want to talk about work. Same goes to you, Forrest. I will see you probably within the week, and I hope everything is good. Okay.
Bye now.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Hello. Wait. Okay. All right. Bye, Tommy. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.